Okay, 1 second.
Evan in a second.
Oh, pretty good.
Catch me all
You
week.
got jokes. All right. We good? All right.
We ready? All right.
Woohoo! Yeah! Let's get pumped. Thank you.
Woo, season 8. Okay, hello everyone. Bienvenidos. Thanks for coming out to the Central Library today. Gracias por venir a la Biblioteca Central. My name is Diana Olivo-Posner, and I'm the Principal Librarian, Associate Director of the Exploration and Creativity Department of the Los Angeles Public Library.
Yeah, Diane! Woo!
And over to...
Oh, I know me. And I'm Kevin Alcooney, also a librarian here in the Exploration and Creativity Department, and we're here to welcome you to our kickoff program for Season 8 of L.A. Made. Woo! Woo! First one for Season 8.
And I just want to first say, Kevin looks really great in his cardigan. LA, woo! Okay, now before we begin, we'd like to take a moment and thank the National Endowment for the Humanities, our Library Foundation, woo! Couldn't do this without them, and our behind-the-scenes staff for helping bring the LA Made programs to you. LA Made focuses on the diverse landscape of Los Angeles, highlighting the immense artistic and performance talent that has developed in the course of the city's eclectic history. If you would like to see more of our amazing programs, please visit our online calendar at lapl.org/events, E-V-E-N-T-S.
That's how you spell it?
That's how you spell it.
Yep.
And for our LA Made programs, visit lapl.org, L-A-Made, L-A-M-A-D-E.
Oh, well done. We'd also like to take this opportunity to recognize and acknowledge the first people of this land, honor their elders past and present, as well as their descendants who are citizens of these nations. For more information on which territory you may reside on, check out native-land.ca. All right, just a couple of other real quick housekeeping tips before we begin. Please silence your electronic devices so we don't distract our speakers. Just take a quick moment to locate the exits at the back and side of the auditorium. If you parked in the garage underneath the library today, you can get your parking ticket validated at the information desk, which is in the main lobby. And the parking today will only be $1 as long as you parked after 1 p.m. and leave before 5 p.m.
That's a bargain, I was going to say.
Yeah.
Woo!
Take advantage. And please no eating or drinking except for bottled water here in the auditorium. So thank you so much for in advance. And bathrooms are just down the hallway and to your right if you need them.
Yes, please do make sure to hydrate.
Yeah.
Hydrate
Okay.
with that water. And now for today's amazing program, LA in an Hour with Evan Lovett.
Woo!
Evan Lovett is the creator of social media mainstay LA in a Minute and host of the podcast In a Minute with Evan Lovett. During this hour-long program, Evan will explore the history and culture of our city in fascinating and entertaining soundbites with a focus on how everything in Los Angeles is intertwined. He will be in conversation with our own Kelly Wallace, the Central Library's California History Specialist. Woo, Kelly!
Yeah, Kel! Also awesome.
And now let's now welcome to our LA Made stage, Evan and Kelly.
Woo! Woo! Yeah! All right!
Thank you, Diane and Kevin. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Kelly, for being here for the interview. Diane, Kevin, for facilitating. Alan up in the booth. And just want to give a big shout out to everybody who showed up today. I really appreciate you. And, you know, LA in a Minute's just getting started. So we're very excited. And thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate you guys.
As we do a brief introduction, starting in January 2022, Evan Lovett has been informing and enlightening us on all things LA, entertaining us all the while, and making history fun. Evan Lovett was born and raised in Los Angeles. His father used to take him on drives around town, sharing his love of the city. and making frequent stops at Pioneer Chicken.
That's right.
Evan stayed local for college and graduated from UCLA with a degree in journalism.
Actually, the degree was in sociology.
It was?
But I did practice
you were in
journalism, though. I wrote for the Daily Bruin. Go Bruin.
Okay, thank you for that correction. With his rapid-fire delivery and passion for his subject, LA in a Minute has become a social media phenom. He has covered everything from Cal Worthington, to parrots, to palm trees, to helicopters, to the Beverly Hills Speedway. Who knew? Not me. Fatburger, and so many things in between. But let's go back to the beginning and talk about the origin story, how this all got started. I believe it involves a backyard barbecue, cousins.
Backyard barbecues, maybe a little bit of a stretch, but it was a definite family situation. So it was the winter of 2021. And so I get a little verklempt. I'm very, very Dick Vermeil for any of you guys who get that reference. But so in the winter of in the winter of 2021, you know, my wife, she's Mexican, very proud Mexican, and I am, of course, very proud to be married to a Mexican here in Los Angeles specifically. But that said, she has a lot of cousins and a lot of relatives. And, you know, more than a handful of these cousins are younger than me. So being somebody who always wants to kind of at least be in touch with what the cool kids are doing or seeing what's going on, I'm always checking in and seeing, you know, what are the kids up to these days, right? So I remember, you know, this winter celebration, it may have been a backyard barbecue. This is Los Angeles,
call it
of
a
course.
barbecue.
Always we could have these barbecues. You know, they're telling me all the kids are on TikTok. And so immediately I'm like, all right, I don't even want any more of this conversation. I saw what TikTok did I saw what Facebook did to the world, and then all I knew about TikTok at the time was dances and viral videos and things like this. And they're like, no. You like news. I know you're somebody who loves telling people news. We get our news on TikTok. And I was like, this is a terrible idea. Like, news on Facebook is what, you know, sent the world careening a different direction. They were like, no. It's different. There's New York Times. There's Washington Post. There's this lady who reads the news from under her desk. And for some reason, that lady who reads the news under her desk, kind of light bulb sort of went off. And now, being somebody who's always been into news, I didn't graduate with a degree in journalism, but I was a journalist, and I love chasing stories. And one of my first bosses labeled me an information station. I'm somebody who likes getting information in and then disseminating that information. I couldn't wait, you know, whatever it is, I text my friends. If I get a story about sports, about the world, about food. And I remember, you know, texting my friends that month, I'd been reading this book by George Geary called Made in California, which had all these restaurants that started in California. And I'd text them, hey guys, did you know Taco Bell started as a hamburger stand called Bell's Burgers? Hey guys, did you know Denny's started as Danny's Donuts? And maybe I was the only one who was interested in that on those threads, but I always text people. And then so they're telling me, you know, that we get our news from TikTok. And I'm always an avid newspaper reader and subscriber to this day, still get the physical LA Times. And my son, Felix, who's right here, he was just getting into screen time. And so there's these always battles. Anybody who has kids understands these battles about screen time. And you want to make sure it's quality content. And he's starting to discover TikTok, which by my discernation was absolutely not quality content. And I'm like, dang it, you can't have this battle every day. I don't want to say no screen time. So again, that light bulb goes off. I put all these things together for my wife's cousins at the backyard barbecue. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start a TikTok feed that is based on news of Los Angeles that I read in the newspaper. And if you go to my initial TikTok videos, it was me holding up an LA Times, giving the synopsis of 2 or 3 stories in a minute. And again, the goal was to have my son's interest and to provide quality content on the screen, on social media. And so what ended up happening, first couple weeks, I do these LA in a minutes with the LA Times, and I hold the LA Times. And people started watching, people started subscribing, and I'm like, man, there's nothing to it. This is what I do on a daily basis, like, as opposed to me, texting my friends, here's what happened. I just put it on TikTok, and all of a sudden I have 1,000 subscribers within 2 weeks. I've been on Twitter for 14 years, had like 500 subscribers. I'm like, there's something to this TikTok, and I at least feel like this content is a little bit, it's positive, it's informative, people getting news, people getting informed. But then about 2 weeks in, the truth is the news isn't always that exciting. And, my son was maybe tuning out here and there, potentially. He's a curious kid, but news is not always exciting. So going back to George Geary and Made in California, I noticed all these restaurants started right here in Los Angeles. And look, I'm a child of the San Fernando Valley, 1980s, 1990s. We were eating the hell out of some fast food, okay? Like, I was lunchtime in high school when we were senior, and I finally got to go to these, go to lunch. That meant let's go to McDonald's, let's go to Taco Bell, let's go to Tommy's, let's go to Fatburger. And all those places came from LA. And I'm like, what? Like, to me, that's history. So I put together this video that is the 10 oldest fast food chains that started in Los Angeles. And that was the first video that, as the kids say, kind of went viral. And that's where LA in a Minute essentially really started.
Into overdrive. Let's show it.
What is up? This is your LA in a Minute, and today's episode is pretty awesome. We're going to talk about the top 10 oldest fast food chains that originated in Los Angeles. Let's get into it. Founded in 1948 by Harry and Esther Snyder in Baldwin Park, Harry saw car culture developing and knew people would want to eat on the open road. So he tinkered in his garage, came up with the first two-way speaker, and the drive-thru was born, and so was In-N-Out Burger. Number 9, in Exposition Park in 1947, Lovett Yancey opened a 3-stool hamburger stand called Mr. Fatburger. This was huge because an African-American woman owning her own business in the 40s in a racially charged United States made Yancey a true pioneer. And by the way, in 1952, the Mr. was dropped and it became Fatburger. Number 8, originally founded in 1946 in North Hollywood as Walsh's Hot Dogs by Richard and Bernice Walsh, who sold chili dogs and tamales. Shortly thereafter, the chain name changed to Cupid's, which was Bernice's nickname. Number 7, also in 1946, Dave Barham opened a stand on Santa Monica Beach that served fresh squeezed lemonade and ice cream cones called Party Puffs. Realizing that menu might be a little limited, Barham used his mom's cornbread recipe, made corn dogs, put them on a stick, changed the name of his stand to Hot Dog on a Stick, and a beachside and food court legend was born. Number 6, also in 1946, Tommy Kulaks bought a spot on Beverly and Rampart for $800 and built an 8x15 stand with only enough room inside for the cooks. He had enough room for chili though, and that's the secret sauce that spawned hundreds of imitators in Los Angeles and made Tommy's the original. Number 5, again in 1946, George Foster bought the rights to Dairy Queen in California, but the state wouldn't let him use the word dairy in the name because the product did not have a high enough percentage of butterfat. Instead, he changed the name to Foster's Old Fashioned Freeze, opened up in Inglewood, and a milkshake legend was born. Number 4, in 1941, Carl Karcher and his wife Margaret purchased a hot dog cart on the corner of Florence and Central in Los Angeles. They soon had 4 hot dog carts, but they soon opened their first full-service restaurant, Carl's Drive-In Barbecue, in Anaheim in 1946, and eventually became Carl's Jr. Number 3, in 1937, Patrick McDonald opened the Airdrome, a food stand which sold hamburgers for 10 cents. His sons Maurice and Richard moved the entire building to San Bernardino, where they renamed it McDonald's Barbecue and eventually McDonald's. Number 2, in 1939, Paul and Betty Pink opened a push cart selling hot dogs and tamales on the corner of La Brea and Melrose. 1946, they built their own building, and Pink's Hot Dogs has been an LA institution ever since. And number 1, with $300, Bob Wean opened up Bob's Pantry in Glendale in 1936. So Bob's pioneered the use of car hops, which makes it the oldest fast food restaurant that originated in Los Angeles. All right, LA, it's been a minute.
1946 was a big year for fast food restaurants.
It absolutely was. And that's because it was after World War II, with everybody coming home and industry developing in Los Angeles, the car finally taking hold, and people realizing, like, hey, if I want some of this, these delicious fast food hamburgers, that term fast food wasn't invented yet, but if I want some of these hamburgers and fries, the best place to eat them is in the car. And what better place to be in the car than Los Angeles, which pioneered the freeway?
One of the many themes running through that video is car culture, and then food. Food is such an important part of Los Angeles.
Food is, possibly before. Okay, so my passion has always been Los Angeles. I remember as a little kid just trying to, remember what celebrities, athletes, scientists were from or had spent time in Los Angeles. Albert Einstein, by the way, lived in Los Angeles. And I was always just, that intrigued me. And the food is kind of my secondary passion, right? Like I love eating, I love cooking. My wife is a great cook. We like eating together. But it's so fun to just know, for me, like, again, the same thing as if, Barack Obama went to school at Occidental. It's the same, in my mind, it's the same kind of gravitas that, like, yo, did you know Fatburger started in Los Angeles? So it's just so many of these different places coming from Los Angeles. And I know fast food has a stigma, but it gives me this pride because it's something that we exported to the world, and it really does to this day kind of dominate world culture. I mean, whether it's fast food or now, of course, we've, become more sophisticated in Los Angeles cuisine, if you will. Take taco trucks. Raul Martinez and King Taco was the first taquero. And, Roy Choi of Kogi, is
Food trucks,
totally changed how people eat. And that's food truck culture because of him. And that comes from Los Angeles. So again, just knowing that history, to me, a place, Los Angeles, has always been denigrated as somewhere that doesn't have culture and it doesn't have history. And you know what? Even if you start with just fast food, no. You know what the truth is? You look behind any corner, you peel off any layers, and Los Angeles has a ton of history and culture. So that was kind of the first one that went viral, and that's sort of where I started.
Well, I've heard you mention somewhere that you'd been on Twitter for 10 years, and what'd you say, have 500 follows? And then, I mean, with this, you went up to 100,000, right? Within a couple of weeks?
So right now, it's at 130,000+ on Instagram, 136,000 on TikTok, and it's pretty mind-blowing because it's not just people in Los Angeles, although the people in Los Angeles are my heart and soul, by the way. That's on the record, off the record, everything in between. But you know what I think it is Los Angeles has this mystique worldwide where we get people from Singapore, Australia, Russia that are telling me, I've always wanted to go to Los Angeles, or I went to Los Angeles once and it was so amazing. And you're somebody that kind of explains the culture and the history. And like, here's the thing. The truth is, I'm not a historian. I'm not formally, again, I graduated with a degree in sociology with, isn't the most demanding educational, it's not the most rigorous coursework. But that said, I'm extremely curious and genuinely passionate. And the thing is, people respond to that. And Los Angeles is the city where here we have that pride that people really want to know about that history and culture. And around the world, again, people know Los Angeles is one of the world's great cities. And it's so amazing that we're such a new and modern city. Los Angeles, again, the Poblador is in 1781, official city in 1851. But we're even talking 1890. Los Angeles had barely 10,000 people. I'm looking at my watch. 130 years. My watch is one of those watches that tells years. But no, it's just kidding. But 130 years, and we've become one of the most important and influential cities in the world. And that story needs to be told. And I'm just discovering it along with everybody. And I kind of think that that's the appeal. Is I'm not a historian. I'm just somebody who's curious that wants to discover what Los Angeles really has to offer.
Right, exactly. Well, let's move on to our second video, Alan.
What is up? This is your LA in a minute, and every day in Los Angeles, nearly 3 million vehicles traverse the 650 miles of freeways that make up this complex transportation network. This is a true marvel of engineering, but even more so when you consider that our freeways are based on indigenous travel routes and footpaths. Now this, I had to look into. Let's get into it. So around the time of the Spanish Portola expedition in the 1760s, there were approximately 10,000 Gabrielino Tongva native people in what is now the Los Angeles basin. This is an approximation of where the villages were and where the footpaths between the villages were developed originally. This is a more detailed map, and it kind of shows how the native villages sort of developed around the same places the centers of Los Angeles developed today. And you can see that the tracings of the footpaths sort of go around the natural contours of the earth, the LA River, the tributaries, the channels, the mountains, and those developed and laid the groundwork for today's freeways. One reason the footpaths developed was food scarcity. In the different microclimates of what would become Los Angeles, there was different food available, so the footpaths facilitated the exchange of that different food. Another reason is that intermarriage between the tribelets was encouraged to keep relationships between those villages healthy. In short, greater trade, greater resources, footpaths developed. It's uncanny. Almost every time that they expand a freeway or develop a new freeway, there are archaeological findings that prove that the native people were utilizing these footpaths before we use them as freeways. These are just some of the remnants that are discovered on a consistent basis that prove that these routes were critical to trade, to harvest, to the rituals of the native people. Here's an example. In 1769, Spanish friar Junipero Serra planted a cross and founded the Mission San Diego near the Kumeyaay village of Nipawai. Over the next 50-plus years, Spanish friars would establish 20 more missions and forts and call the road connecting them the El Camino Real. But for thousands of years prior to the Spanish conquest, California had been crisscrossed in every direction by hundreds of Native American pathways and trading routes. And get this, when Portola himself wanted to explore the inland of what would become Los Angeles, and he ran into the high, steep bluffs of the Palisades, he was shown an internal route by the native folk that we know today as the Sepulveda Pass. Similar stories throughout history mapped against the Native American trade routes prove that these were really the precursor to today's freeways. So next time you're driving along our freeways or even stuck in traffic, think of the indigenous people, because they...
Two things strike me about that video. The first one, that we don't think about the infrastructure that we use every day. You don't give it a second thought. You're driving on the freeway, cursing the traffic, and you don't think that there's history behind it.
No, and that's one of my favorite aspects of Los Angeles is because it is taken for granted, whether it's the airports, the freeways, the roads, the river. I mean, you don't think about it because you're just using it.
And the second thing is that while Native American history is quite often hidden around, but it's there. And so much of LA, place names, the routes, the street names.
It's so important. I live off of Tahunga, near Cahuenga. I mean, within a stone's throw. And, you know, growing up, the truth is, never really thought about the names. You know, it's just another name. And doing LA in a minute, you come to realize, like, of course, we knew that the indigenous people were here first, but what an impact the Kiz, the Gabrielino, the Tongva, the Chumash, I mean, all these different tribes. I mean, Encino was one to me where it's so cool because I've gone to the golf course. We used to play basketball at this basketball court that's literally 30 yards away from where you know, an indigenous tribe had first settled in the San Fernando Valley. And me being a native of the San Fernando Valley, by the way, I'm from Sepulveda, which is now known as North Hills, which is basically the geographical center of the San Fernando Valley. Being from the valley, I have that kind of pride. and knowing that Encino's where it was first settled, and there was a natural hot springs there. And today, it's a guitar-shaped lake, right? A Spanish guitar, because one of the people who had subsequently, you know, the colonizers came, and then people, the land, the ranchos switched hands and everything, and they made this natural hot spring into a Spanish guitar-shaped, essentially, lake. But the fact of knowing this history and that it was there is so important because, again, those were the footsteps that created Los Angeles. But even more than that, it's so important to recognize these cultures that have, unfortunately, intentionally been trampled on, been had disappeared and things like that. And another one, I just recently did an episode about the Santa Susana Pass. And I had read about the Santa Susana Pass for various reasons, but in doing this episode, they uncovered some artwork from, you know, tens of thousands of years ago by the indigenous people that were there. And it's, you know, they didn't have necessarily the written language and the archival aspects that we do now, like we do at the LA Public Library. By the way, 150 years, LA Public Library. But it's so important to recognize this because these were the trailblazers. These were, you know, the only natives of Los Angeles were these tribes and these indigenous people. And without our forebears, we don't exist. We're not here in Los Angeles. So it's so important to recognize. And it's kind of funny because in certain episodes, especially when I do neighborhoods, it is incumbent on me to observe and recognize and tell people, you know, this is who was here first. This is whose land it was. And it almost becomes a paint by numbers exercise because all of these neighborhoods, they were there first. But at the same time, there were so many years and generations where they were not recognized and acknowledged. And so that makes it much more important. So, I mean, when I discovered this, and again, this is, a lot of my stuff comes from books, or the inspiration comes from books. And there was a book that a follower had sent me called Ancient Los Angeles. And I was like, what do you mean, Ancient Los Angeles? Los Angeles is such a new city. There is no Ancient Los Angeles. And I read this chapter where it was, you know, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, as I did in the episode, the freeways come from native footpaths. And you're like, what? Like, it makes so much sense. Like intuitively, it makes sense. But I never thought about it in that regard because, to your point, I'm just sitting there driving the freeway. I'm on the 101 to the 405, and, you know, we're just driving. We're like, yep, I guess this is where they put freeways, and you don't really, like, think about it. But that's really the reason why it happened, and those routes were chosen for very specific strategic reasons that still apply today, thousands of years later. And it's just a testament to the native folk that, you know, they had that kind of foresight that we're still building off of today in 2023.
Right, the wisdom. Which actually also leads us into our next video in a way. Why is the Los Angeles River enclosed in concrete?
What is up? This is your LA in a minute, and I always wanted to know, why is the LA River enclosed in concrete? Let's get into it. The answer is pretty straightforward. Flooding. They say historically there's been a flood once every 50 years at the Los Angeles River, but it happened twice in the 1930s. New Year's Eve 1933 into New Year's Day 1934, the Crescenta Valley flood wiped out Montrose, Tujunga, La Cañada, and Crescenta Valley. And in 1938, the Great Flood of Los Angeles killed over 100 people and caused what would be now $1.5 billion of damage. Los Angeles Mayor Frank Shaw had to take action, so along with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they began to encase the streams, the tributaries, and even the river into a concrete channel. Our concrete river has lost some charm, but saved many lives, and there is a beautification project underway, and now you know why the LA River is enclosed in concrete. Like, follow, and subscribe. All right, LA, it's been a minute.
I can't wait to talk about the Los Angeles River. As important it is to the development and growth of Los Angeles and the history of Los Angeles, it is so often the punchline of jokes. People don't even really call it a river. People from out of town are like, what are you talking about? The LA River, as you're driving over it. And I'm probably a lot of Angelinos also. They're like laugh hysterically when you say, oh no, that's the LA River. And going back to the Native Americans, interestingly enough, they didn't build or live on the floodplain. They would go down and use the river, but they didn't live on the floodplain. But of course, future generations of
City expanded
immigrants
to
or
vastly.
the people from the east, we've decided to build on the river, and that has increased the damage from the floods. And I know part of the reason that people didn't really object, a lot of people didn't object too much when they encased it in concrete, was because it was this sort of afterthought that, you know, all the streets drained into and trash flowed into, and it wasn't taken care of or appreciated at all. Anyway, I find the Los Angeles River to be just a fascinating.
I'll tell you this. I'll tell you an anecdote. And, you know, truth be told, one of my favorite inside jokes that I have with some very close friends of mine is me walking by the LA River every day and snapping a picture of the often dry riverbed and saying the mighty LA River, you know, and when it does rain, you get a significant river flow, but it still doesn't feel like a river. It feels like a concrete channel. And to your point, when I was growing up, the only thing I knew about the river was that it wasn't a river. We called it the wash. I did not know, truth be told, I knew there was an LA River. I knew that there was this, you know, mythological LA River somewhere. But I didn't know where the river was, even though I lived 4 blocks away. This is a true story. I lived 4 blocks away from the river, and it was always called the Wash. And the thing it was most famous for at the time, at least in my neighborhood, was that they filmed part of Terminator 2 in the river. And I don't know if you guys remember that movie where there's this huge big rig that like kind of crashes in the river to chase Arnold Schwarzenegger on his motorcycle. And that was the most important thing about the LA River to me while I was growing up. But even my parents, who were these huge LA people, and by the way, at the beginning, you said my dad drove me around. It was my dad and my mom. I would be remiss to not mention my mom as well. They both loved LA and instilled in me the love of Los Angeles, but had never mentioned the LA River. And luckily, you know, within the last 10 years, the city of Los Angeles and the Friends of the LA River and various groups have really pushed the LA River's importance in a modern context. And it still is this, I don't want to say unsightly, but it's definitely not a picturesque river. You know, like anybody who's seen real rivers may say that the LA might not qualify in the same context, at least from a beauty perspective. But what it means to Los Angeles, and now that they're really emphasizing the importance with these greenways, and they're planting native plants around the outskirts of the river and doing bike paths and running, and it's a slow process, but it's a process that's making progress. They're starting to show what the LA River can be. And it's still going to be a concrete channel because, unfortunately, that's the way that we design. Not unfortunately. I mean, we don't want to flood our beloved Los Angeles, so take the water out to sea. But they're starting to make it a bigger deal and, you know, build housing along the river and things of that nature. But the importance of the LA River is something that can't be understated because going back historically, when the Pobladores founded Los Angeles, again in 1781, it was 44 people that set up camp specifically right by the LA River in essentially what is the Alvaro Street area right now. And it's funny because with my wife, when we meet her parents, we used to always meet in Alvaro Street. And as a white Jewish guy growing up, I had always been ambivalent. I didn't know the history. I didn't look into the history, but I was like, geez, Alvaro Street seems kind of like touristy, right? You get these tchotchkes. My mom would call them tchotchkes. Get these tchotchkes, little, you know, touristy things that tourists buy, and they got all the restaurants that sell essentially, or so I thought, essentially same food. And you're like, I don't know. Even as a younger kid, I'd be like, this is like what they want white people to think that Mexican culture was, and I sort of looked through it with that lens. But then it turns out that was really where the city was founded, in the original Pueblo. And look, Olvera Street is a vision of Christine Sterling, and there still are, maybe some people are ambivalent on what Olvera Street represents, but what it really is running through Olvera Street, there's a row of bricks, and you can look, and it's mostly brick, but there's a row of different colored bricks that runs through. And you look closely because they don't notice. There's a little plaque, but people are walking on it. It's not like a huge thing people stop at. But that was the Zanja Madre. And what that was LA's first, aqueduct is the wrong term, but it's where essentially they would divert the fresh water so the people of Los Angeles, the pobladores and their families and their progeny would kind of develop and get their fresh water. And that was right there in Olvera Street, and that was siphoned off of the LA River. And thus, it was a very strategic location. And they basically had to start Los Angeles right there because geographically, that was the most important area, or the area of the Los Angeles River that was most capable of starting this city. And they did not have the foresight of knowing what Los Angeles would become. The LA River only had enough water for about 100,000 people. We're far beyond that. That's a different part of the story. But an interesting thing about the LA River is I always wondered too is why downtown Los Angeles isn't near the beach. Everybody loves LA, and everybody's favorite thing about LA, the beach and Malibu and Santa Monica. And downtown's so many miles away, but why didn't they, start the city near the beach? Well, because that's where the freshwater source was, and the LA River was so important, and that's the only place that you really could have started that city. And it's funny, I'm still fortunate enough to walk across every day that I'm going to work on my videos and stuff like that. Walk across the LA River, still send texts to my friends about, the mighty LA rages on today, knowing that it's a wink river. It's a river, but it is so important to the development of LA, and we're lucky that they are making it more of a priority to the people of Los Angeles to recognize and acknowledge what it really represented.
Yeah, those efforts to reclaim parts of the river are really terrific. I'm looking forward to that. But when you mentioned the beach, it cracks me up because whenever you're watching a Laker game or something like that, and it's in downtown LA, and they always are showing the Santa Monica Pier, Malibu, and you're like, okay, that's not really very close to where we're playing basketball, but that's okay.
And I gotta mention, there's a gentleman named Memo Torres of LA Taco. And I know LA Made, by the way, come to the next one on July 23rd. They're having Javier Cabral and Brisha Lopez. Javier is from LA Taco. LA Taco is a great publication. But there's a guy, Memo Torres from LA Taco, who put out a meme a couple years ago that's still legendary to this day. And it circles the area of Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, Malibu. And it's like, this is what people think Los Angeles is, right? And that goes back to that beach sentiment, because that's the world view, or even the rest of the United States view of Los Angeles. And then it's like, but here's the real Los Angeles. And it's everything else, from downtown to Boyle Heights to San Pedro and all the awesome places, San Gabriel Valley, you know what I mean? All these awesome places in Los Angeles that don't sort of get that national, they don't fit into what Los Angeles is from a national perspective. But again, the truth is that's what Los Angeles really is. And it all starts with the LA River.
And that's one of the great things about LA in a minute, helping us find all these other parts of Los Angeles. But talking about the LA River and water leads us again to our next video. Where do we get our water?
What is up? This is your LA in a minute. And if you have ever wondered how LA gets its water, well, it's right here at the Cascades at the LA Aqueduct. Let's get into how it happens. So the 5-year construction of this pipeline and this whole project was completed in 1913, the brainchild of civil engineer William Mulholland. It was compared to building the Panama Canal as far as complexity. It comes from 233 miles away, the Owens River Valley. And William Mulholland, civil engineer and the namesake of Mulholland Drive, famously said to the residents of Los Angeles, "There it is, take it." In 1905, Mulholland recommended to the Board of Water that the Owens Valley in the Eastern Sierras was the only viable source of supplemental water for the city's population. The following year, L.A. had an application for rights of way across federal lands for the purpose of constructing the aqueduct. So the most difficult part of the construction was the tunneling. There were 142 separate tunnels, totaling 43 miles in length. You can see the scale of the tunnels here and the tools that they had at the time to dig these things out. So the roadless territory spanned by this $23 million water system was too tough for the automobiles of that era, so they had mule teams hauling the materials for the pipes and everything necessary for the build. I'm telling you, the scope of this project was massive. Just look at this thing. At one point, there were 6,000 workers working on the pipeline, and they had housing, living quarters, cooks, mess halls, and the whole deal to house all of the employees and laborers. So the use of steel was limited by its tremendous cost, being that it was imported from Pennsylvania at the time. So they had to build these cement plants in increments throughout the construction. Even towards the completion of the project, most of the work was still done by mules, even though technology was improving. And they eventually had some steam shovels and dredges and even the first Caterpillar tractors doing the work. But right here, you can see the scale of it with some mules adding a little section of pipeline. So when Mulholland was up in that car earlier, this is effectively what he was looking at. This is the beautiful swath of land that consists of the Owens River Valley in the Eastern Sierras. A group that included Mulholland was labeled the San Fernando Syndicate, which eventually led to Water Wars, which was eventually fictionalized and made into a movie called Chinatown starring Jack Nicholson. Water get turned into drinking water anyway. Well, south of the 5 freeway, also in Sylmar, there's a filtration plant where a chemical process consolidates the dirt and impurities, pushes them through anthracite coal, and as soon as 45 minutes later, it enters the city's water system. This process cleans 600 million gallons a day, 166 billion gallons per year. All right, LA, there it is. Take it. It's been a minute.
So I have to say something. That was one of my original videos that was non-newspaper style, and it's a pretty informative video, but that one has spawned quite a few, I don't want to say imitations because they're my own, but it's quite a few additional videos because it's so important to Los Angeles. And as we know, like, look, we got this amazing rain, which I love, by the way, and the drought isn't quite, you know, the same narrative as it is now, but water is so important to Los Angeles, and we're not really supposed to have it again. The LA River is only enough water to supply for 100,000 people, and here we are. We're more than 10 million in the LA County, Greater Los Angeles region at this point, and it's pretty nuts, and it's because of William Mulholland and his very complex legacy, by the way, but yeah.
An amazing story, and you know, he was a Zanjero. He was one of the people that kept those zanjas. That was one of his first job in
good
LA.
Point. And it's funny, I just reran this episode the other day about the St. Francis Dam, which, by the way, not to bring a negative connotation, but is the greatest disaster in Los Angeles history, which was also checked off by William Mulholland. But again, this man's legacy in Los Angeles as a self-taught, by the way, I don't know if you realize, he was self-taught. William Mulholland didn't have formal education, and it was his brainchild to bring the water down from the Eastern Sierras, 250 miles, which is just...
Think about that. I mean,
in these pipes...
Why would someone think like, oh yeah, that's a lot. That's a great idea.
And again, with the aftermath, as you saw in there, Water Wars, huge episode, long-form episode, it caused a lot of strife. And I feel like, and my brother-in-law is from Northern California, and this might explain our strife. No, I'm just kidding. We have a great relationship.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like that might be at the root of the Northern California, Southern California, let's call it rivalry, because we did essentially, not going to use the word steal, but we definitely... utilize some of important resources. But that's how LA was founded, and that's so important to Los Angeles. And the fact that it's in Sylmar, and I drove by it so many times growing up, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have too, where we made jokes, that's a water slide or whatever the case may be. And you never really, or I never really realized the importance of what it meant to Los Angeles, because without that aqueduct, we don't have Los Angeles. And, you know, to this day, we have other water sources in the Colorado River and things like that. But it was really significant. And to me, it's a sense of pride, because being a Valley guy, you know, it goes right through the right into the San Fernando Valley. And like, you know, there it is. Take it.
Yeah, there wouldn't be the San Fernando Valley really without that. That's
absolutely.
what allowed all the development out there, lining the pockets of developers.
Yeah, true. Very true.
Yeah. Well,
And that enabled something that I want to kind of circle back on, especially from the Talk of a Footpath video, is natives versus transplants. If you don't mind me asking, how many people in here were born in Los Angeles? Wow, that's a great turnout. And that's more than perhaps any room that I'm usually in. And I think that goes to show the sense of pride that us native Los Angeles folk have in our city. But natives versus transplants, and the water, the footpaths, the infrastructure, all of that really facilitated transplants coming to Los Angeles, which is part of the lifeblood of what made Los Angeles, whether it's palm trees or squirrels, two you know, videos that I've done about transplants in Los Angeles. Redwood trees. I couldn't believe we had a redwood tree a block behind our house, where I had to do like a quintuple take, where I'm like, that can't be a redwood in the middle of Studio City. But sure enough, like, something about Los Angeles really draws people from the outside. And I'm sure a lot of you know transplants, maybe you're married to them, you know, but LA is that city that has that kind of draw. And all of these things that we did as a blank canvas in such a late period of human development kind of enabled that to be this welcoming place to people from outside Los Angeles, which is really neat. And again, the natives, you know, blazed the trail, and then Los Angeles, people like William Mulholland and things of that nature were the ones who really facilitated and enabled that to make place. But part of the flavor of Los Angeles is all of these transplants. And just looking in this room, you know, the one thing that makes Los Angeles the most special to me, truthfully, is the diversity, right? And I mentioned I'm married to a Mexican woman. I'm Jewish. My grandfather on my mom's side escaped the Holocaust from Austria. My grandma's from Ukraine. My other grandma's from the UK. But the point is, Los Angeles has been this place. African American, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, Middle Eastern, you name it. And one of my favorite episodes ever, and one of the most important things about Los Angeles, in my opinion, is the diversity. More Koreans than anywhere outside of Korea. More Mexicans than anywhere outside of Mexico. More Persians than any place outside of, you know, what is essentially like the greater Persian Empire. Like, all these different, more Australians than any place outside of Australia. One of our closest family friends is Ugandan. More Ugandans than anywhere outside of Uganda. Like, what city, somebody tell me, what cities in the world have all of these different people coming together? And then the beautiful thing about it, and like, I know New York's diverse. I know I'm going to hear London and all these great cities, and they are great world cities. But Los Angeles, every neighborhood, rich or poor, you have all of these people represented, and that's something to me that, like, you can't duplicate, and it's so valuable and so important. And again, it's transplants in Los Angeles, which is one of the most important stories of how Los Angeles developed, and whether it's because of the river or because of the water or wherever it comes from, like, that's what makes Los Angeles. So I just wanted to make a point of saying that, because that's something I remember ever since I was a little kid. That's so important and so important to Los Angeles.
No, absolutely. That's one. But that also, we're talking about recurrent themes that run through a lot of things. That mind about transplants brings me back to food, right? Because so much of the wonderful food we have in Los Angeles is all from transplants.
The American dream, man. This is the place where the American dream really happens for so many people. that may not be the American dream right there in person. But that said, I mean, again, like going back to the story, King Taco Man, Raul Martinez came from Mexico. It's just so many. Lovey Yancey, Fat Burger, like African American. Think about that. In the 1940s, an African American starting a hamburger chain, like, it's going to be shunned in so many places. And then that became $1 billion business. Like, Los Angeles facilitates that. And whether it's the people, and I'm not naive. There's racism and there's been racism, and that's a fact of life. But Los Angeles kind of facilitates that. Whether it's the climate, whether it's the atmosphere, whether it's the people, Panda Express and other great stories. All these are such great stories and such great American dream stories that happen right in Los Angeles. And a lot of the stories are told through food. So, I mean, it's awesome.
I like the story of, I never say it right, sriracha. Hot sauce, anyway.
Sriracha. There's sriracha and tapatio. There you go.
And
Exactly.
there's a massive shortage. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we could talk all day, but let's go. Let's roll our last video of the day. Go ahead, Alan.
What is up? This is your LA in a minute, and a little more than 100 years ago, Los Angeles was a lawless, dusty town of barely 10,000 people. Now, population's over 10 million. So what happened in that century plus that caused Los Angeles to be one of the world's great cities? Well, there are 3 origin stories that without even one, Los Angeles would not have developed into the metropolis that it is today. I'm going to get into all 3, but today let's start with origin story number 1, oil. Let's get into it. In the late 19th century, Los Angeles was an isolated, agricultural, lawless outpost whose only migrants were people that didn't strike gold during the gold rush. This all changed when oil was discovered by Edward Doheny in 1892. Los Angeles went from a sleepy little town to a place where people were motivated to come out to strike it rich. Many oil industry workers from Oklahoma and Texas followed the oil and made the journey west. Everybody wanted to be the next Edward Doheny or J. Paul Getty, who was the richest man in the history of the world at that time. Los Angeles oil was so attractive because it was closer to the surface and easier to extract. Add to that the newly minted automobile, the weather, and the proximity to a port, and Los Angeles had the recipe for exponential expansion. Everybody from hucksters to the media was trying to capitalize on the oil boom, evidenced by the fact that in 1923, the Long Beach Press advertised small tracts of land for sale in a community called Petroleum Gardens, with all oil rights included. Now, this is important. Los Angeles had some of the most productive oil fields in world history. By 1930, LA was producing nearly 1/4 of the world's oil output, and the population had boomed to 1.2 million people. With that kind of production in these type of oil fields, Los Angeles was the equivalent of Saudi Arabia today. After World War II, many veterans sought work in LA's oil industry. Despite the fact that they were knowingly exposed to carcinogens, it was considered a, quote, damn good job and a stable job, especially through the post-war period. It was an oil revolution. The oil industry needed pumps, pipes, tanks, drilling rigs, trucks. All these secondary industries started booming in Los Angeles and became the basis of the economy. The growth was astounding. Because of these jobs, because of this industry, suburban and residential communities were popping up virtually overnight. The oil industry was a driver of suburbanization and the shape of the suburbanization that still defines Los Angeles. LA remains the largest urban oil field in the country with thousands of active oil wells. As it stands today, over 3 million Angelenos currently live less than a quarter mile from an active or idle oil well. An inescapable remnant of the oil industry? Cars. Los Angeles went from the biggest oil producer to the biggest oil consumer in all of the United States. Oil was a catapult to Los Angeles as we know it, but it still doesn't exist without origin stories 2 or 3. All right, LA, it's been a minute.
So this is one of my favorite episodes because it's funny when we go to our my brother and sister-in-law's house, and you take La Cienega. Anybody who's been on La Cienega, you see the oil wells, and I'm just like, you're like, this is Los Angeles in the 2020s. Like, are we really still pumping oil? And the answer is not only yes, but we're pumping more oil than any city in the United States. And again, these are the things that get me really fired up about Los Angeles. And this is what I love, because we're so many things. We're Hollywood, and we're Silicon Beach, and and sports and handsome, pretty people, and blah blah blah. But we're still an oil town, man, and that's like insane to think about. And the history of when oil was discovered, to me, it's one of those things that's just serendipitous, in the sense that, like, Los Angeles developed at the perfect time in its history, the only time that it could have developed like that, because that's right when the car was invented. And what would oil be? The oil had been here. La Brea tar pits, you know what I mean? Like, that's essentially the petroleum. And again, sidebar, petroleum gardens, that's hilarious. I loved when I discovered that, by the way, because like nowadays, who would live in petroleum gardens? But La Brea tar pits, and the oil had been here, and look, they used it to patch roofs and stuff like that. And the petroleum had its different uses. But it was just perfect timing that in the history of the world, there's this developing city that only had water enough for 100,000 people, and this madman engineer, William Mullen, would be like, no, we'll make it enough water for 10 million people, don't worry. But that's right when they discover oil as freeways and cars are coming in. It's kind of like the perfect amalgamation of what made Los Angeles. And it's funny because, by the way, Origin Stories 2 and 3 are water in Hollywood. I should tell you guys to, watch the videos. But the truth is, everybody thinks L.A. developed because of Hollywood, which, again, is true. And it's all, timing and circumstances. But without oil, it doesn't even turn into Hollywood. And it's so funny to me that we never think of L.A. as an oil city. And why would we? But it is. And it's sort of a microcosm for what LA in a minute really is just like, there's so many cool stories and facts and histories and people that make Los Angeles what it is today. And, all you need to do is really look and discover. Beverly Hills High School had one of the most prolific oil derricks in all of Los Angeles. And it's just funny to me that these things are happening in our city. And it's not just diversity of the people, but diversity of the economy, and just the ideas and the creativity of people that have made things out of nothing, or out of, in this case, natural resources in Los Angeles. And that's why this video and kind of a lot of these videos are so important in telling the story of Los Angeles in all its complexity and richness. Because again, I am a booster. That's what I do, but it comes from the heart. And it's one of the reasons why Los Angeles is so amazing, because there are these stories that people don't talk about and don't shine a light on. And that's what I think that LA in a minute really does. And kind of, why, if I may say, it's important in even a tiny context, I think that that's where it comes from, is because, again, I never learned this stuff in school. I never learned. And again, I'm going a little bit of tangent, but the Biddy Mason story, if you guys don't know this Biddy Mason story, one of the first major property owners in Los Angeles, she has a tiny little park in downtown that's such a small park, but at least it's something. But I never heard about her in school. And she's an African-American female that used to be a slave, and she fought for her own freedom by herself, self-taught reader, and she fought for her own freedom in court. And she got that freedom because her slave owner made the mistake of trying to come to California where slavery was illegal. And she got her freedom, and she saved up money, and she bought land in Los Angeles and became one of the first property owners in L.A. And that's a huge, important, amazing story that needs to be told, that I never heard in school. And most of these stories I never heard in school. And that's, like, Los Angeles is so important historically to the rest of the world, not just in Los Angeles, but we need to learn this stuff. And kind of that's why I'm doing LA in a minute. I know it's not what you asked, but that's what LA in a minute is about. And this oil story always kind of brings me down that path because, again, we are the car capital of the world. We may not have the most cars, but damn it, we exported that car culture and made it a thing, and low riders and cruising and all that kind of stuff came from Los Angeles, and that's because of oil. And there's so many of these origin stories that started in Los Angeles. And, you know, it's something that I hope with every LA in a Minute episode, people are like, that was interesting. And that's something that I could go, you know, text my friends and tell them a little stat or tidbit about Los Angeles. And
It touches people and teaches them something new, but it's also the something that you would say, oh, did you know? I mean, you're sneaking that into conversation all the time, some fun little factoids that
I
they
sneak
get
it
from
in
your
all the
thing,
time.
so-
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Without giving you credit, so you look so smart. Okay, we're going to take some questions from the audience, but I just wanted to ask one question real fast. Okay, go ahead. I don't
No,
want to
you
cut
go,
you off.
you go, you go.
Okay, you've got LA in a Minute, and you also have your podcast, In a Minute with Evan Lovett. What's next? Do you have any future plans?
It's a great question. And you know what? As a testament to the LA Public Library, and we are here because of the LA Public Library, and I want to thank everybody, Diane, Kevin, and of course, Kelly, Alan up there in the booth, everybody that helped make this possible. I'm thankful. But I'm also thankful for the library, which again, celebrating 150 years, and the way this kind of came together is because I take my son to the library and we check out books, and he's a good reader, and we have fun, and I discover books. And I couldn't believe that the LA Public Library was 150 years old, because again, this city is such a modern city, and even though it started in 1851, the fact that there was a library like within 20 years while it was still the Wild West is kind of significant, because we didn't even have an LAPD until 1869, and within a couple years after that, we already had the library, which is cool. And by the way, the first LA Public Library was in a department store called Hamburgers. If you guys don't know that, that's a true story. Until it moved into, you know, that we got big grants, a lot of money, not a lot of money, but a lot of money for the time. But the point is, LA Public Library is the reason why this LA Made event is going on, and it's very important to Los Angeles. And I want to do kind of, let's call it like an impromptu, I'm not going to say episode, but I want to go over my 5 favorite books from Los Angeles.
Oh, please,
which
let's
are
hear 'em.
my 5 favorite nonfiction books. Truth is, I don't read a ton of fiction. I know that that's a deficit on my side. You guys can send me recommendations, but I do read a ton of nonfiction. And with respect out to Mike Davis and Kevin Starr, who are the two, you know, scholars of Los Angeles and California, and perhaps the most important, read their books, City of Courts, you know, California Dreams, all this kind of stuff. But my top 5 Los Angeles books are as follows. Number 5, and I've talked about this a little bit recently, Eternity Street by John McFarriger. Unbelievable. It's almost a documentary book. The level of detail in this is amazing, about the frontier Los Angeles from 1840 to 1870. Los Angeles was the Wild West, and we see all these movies, Tombstone and whatnot, but none of them ever take place in Los Angeles. And I never knew LA had a Wild West, but LA was the most wild of the Wild West. It had a murder rate on par with anywhere else in the world. It had a murder rate on par with the cartels in Mexico today, back in the 1840s to 1870s. And it's the story of how Los Angeles developed through these vigilante groups, lynch mobs, and it's really just an amazing, outstanding read. That's called Eternity Street. Number 4 is anything by DJ Waldy, who's I was fortunate enough to meet after I did my Lakewood episode of LA in a Minute. He wrote a book called Holy Land, which was where I learned about Lakewood, which was a city that developed overnight. There was Levittown, Pennsylvania, but Lakewood, California was the first true pre-planned community that worked. And you had homes popping up. You had hundreds of homes selling per day. It went from 0 to something like 17,000 homes in 3 years. And DJ Waldy wrote a book called Holy Land. He has another book called Becoming Los Angeles that are just insane. He has a very good insight on Los Angeles with these short essays. And that needs to be checked out. Number 3 is Rayner Banham, The 4 Ecologies of Los Angeles, which is a little bit of a scholarly, sort of erudite book. But he was a transplant that in the 1960s found the beauty of Los Angeles through the freeways, through the infrastructure, these things that we take for granted, the buildings, you know, this brutalist architecture. And he celebrated it at the risk of being an outcast in these scholarly first real scholars to give Los Angeles this credit. It's like, yo, this is a different thing we got going. It may not be London, it may not be Rome, it may not even be New York or San Francisco, but we need to respect and love Los Angeles. So that book always holds a special place for me. Number 2, and you guys that may or may not be taking notes, take note of this one, because this one is the most important for me as of this point. It's Counterintelligence by Jonathan Gold. The Jonathan Gold, who I know you guys all know, love, and respect, the food writer, the only food writer to ever win a Pulitzer. And this is a collection from 2001, and I bring up the year because it's my theory that the reason why this book is more celebrated is because it was released 1 month before 9/11. But what it is a book called Counterintelligence, where he reviews 250 LA restaurants. And it's not about the restaurants. It's not about the food. What Jonathan Gold did was describe the culture and the people, and it's such a great representation of Los Angeles that's timeless. And again, yeah, he's talking about samosas, and he's talking about Korean barbecue, and he's talking about pupusas and all these great LA food, which in itself is awesome. But, you know, half the restaurants are gone. This is 20 plus years later. But the writing is just so precise and eye-opening about Los Angeles. And it's really something that you can read cover to cover, or you can read it randomly and go from restaurant to restaurant, go to A to Q to B to Z. It's amazing. And number 1, this is an exclusive announcement that I would like to make here. We're working on a book for LA in a minute, and it's called 100 Stories of Los Angeles in a Minute. 100 Stories of LA in a Minute. And thank you guys. And what that is 100 stories of LA in a minute, but it's not just these episodes, because these episodes, if you haven't noticed, they're called LA in a minute, but they tend to run about 3 minutes. And part of the reason is because in Los Angeles, colloquially, you're like, yo, I'm getting off the freeway, I'll be there in a minute. That means like 10 minutes. Like if your friend's getting off the freeway, you're like, oh, I'm gonna go get a snack, I'm gonna do my hair, I might even shower, yeah. But it's not, it's expanded stories with good details and nuggets, some stories that we haven't included in the LA in a Minute series. And it's good for kids, it's good for adults, it's good for your parents, it's good for everybody. And they're quick, they're fun, and we're hoping to turn it into a series, because there's not just 100 stories of LA in a minute, there's 1,000 stories, there's 10,000 stories of LA in a minute. And hopefully that this is the first volume. It's expected to be released hopefully by Christmas, but if not, in 2024. But 100 Stories of LA in a Minute. Keep an eye out. You know I will be doing some social media promotion on that. But that is the number 1 most important and my favorite book in Los Angeles. So thank you guys for being here.
Okay, let's take some questions from the audience.
Thank you. All right, as Cal said, we're going to take some questions, and please remember that a question ends with a question mark, not a period or an exclamation point. Kevin wrote that, so he gets all the credit. Also, please
You're
wait
welcome.
until someone with the microphone comes out so our audience at home can hear the question, and I might have you guys repeat the questions, you all, just because sometimes it won't get picked up on the YouTube. Okay, here we come. Kevin has one. Just raise your hand, and we'll come to you.
All right, we'll start over here.
Given what you know about LA in the past and its various eras and periods of developments, what is your best guess for what the LA of the future will look like 20 to 30 years in the future?
Wow, we are not starting with softball questions here. Okay.
I'll also repeat the question.
You got it? You want to repeat it, or you want me to repeat it?
You do it.
Okay.
Eyes on you.
Given the history of Los Angeles and what we know about it, what do you think the Los Angeles of the future is going to look like in 20 or 30 years? Holy moly. You know, man, Los Angeles is going to keep developing. It's funny because there was a question on this Ask Me Anything that I did that ended up turning into a podcast episode with my beautiful wife, Irene, this week. Please check out the podcast, by the way, In a Minute with Evan Lovett. But one of the questions was about Elon Musk's tunnel. And, you know, I'm not going to weigh in on Elon Musk. And I chose not to address that question actually in the episode. But this is actually a perfect time because I don't, no thoughts about the tunnel. But what I do think why that's applicable is because Los Angeles has always been a city of visionaries. And these ideas and things that have come out of Los Angeles are things we can't contemplate. You know, Los Angeles was the capital of agriculture in the where Los Angeles really first developed even before oil. It's an agriculture city. Then you get oil, and then you get Hollywood. And these things, they didn't come out of nowhere, but Los Angeles really made them, or they made Los Angeles. And there are reasons why not just LA developed, but why the world developed a certain way. So these ideas that come from these visionaries, aerospace, things like that. I mean, you have the nuclear testing out in Santa Susana, again, future episode of LA in a minute. But all these ideas and food, things like that, Los Angeles is a place where creativity thrives and where things that are ideas that maybe we don't have now. I want to say flying cars. My son asked me on occasion, why don't we have flying cars yet? I thought we were supposed to have them, the Jetsons 2000. But who knows what it is, but I do know this. Los Angeles is always the city of tomorrow, is always the city of the future, and Los Angeles is going to be at the forefront of whatever happens worldwide. And so I don't know what Los Angeles is going to look like. I'm not a visionary in that regard, but I do know Los Angeles is going to be the reason why the world develops the way that it does within the next 20 or 30 years. So hopefully that's a sufficient answer for you.
I heard you were talking about the LA River and how you were saying that it's not so much a river anymore. My friend actually calls it the LA Trickle. And you were mentioning they're trying to make it beautiful again. What do you think LA needs to do to make sure that the LA River is restored to its natural beauty?
Great question, great question. So the question ultimately is, what does LA need to do to make sure that LA River is restored to its natural beauty? They are doing a good job, again, because, and it's important to say, because the primary function of the LA River as it is today is to flush all that beautiful, valuable water out to the ocean so it doesn't flood. But they are doing some great things. They want to make the paths walkable with native plants. They are trying to retain some of that water to reuse and reclaim that water to be usable and put back in the ground and put back into the plants. They're making it more, I don't know if the word is explorable, but they're going to have people kayaking. They do have areas where you can kayak in the river. But most importantly, at least now, the first couple steps are making people recognize that there really is an LA River. And I laugh, but I love to see that there's these LA River signs all over town. You see these small white ones and these bigger blue ones. I have a shirt given to me by my great friend Tim that's an LA River shirt that mimics these signs that are there for that river. And the first thing is making people aware that it is a river and how important it is to Los Angeles. And they can't do much in the way, look, it does need to be a concrete channel because of we don't want our neighborhoods getting flooded, the ones that are, you know, built in the areas that perhaps homes should have been built on. But they're doing their best to make it accessible, to make it usable, to have it reflect, you know, native flora and fauna. And there are, it's funny, every day when I'm walking by the LA River, again, I keep pulling up that, but this is true. You see ducks and you see egrets and you see like life in the LA River, and it's really cool. And I kind of think that one day, maybe by the time you're my age, it's going to resemble more of a actual river than the concrete channel that it is today.
Next question.
Hi, Evan. Love the pod. Love the videos you put out and everything. My question is more about, because I live in the South Bay. I'm a Hawthorne resident, home of the Boring Company and SpaceX. My question is, because my dad worked in the aviation industry, if you're going to do a series about the aviation industry in Los Angeles, particularly my dad worked for Western Airlines, which started in the 20s in LA.
What was the actual question, though?
Oh,
sorry.
a series about the aviation industry in Los Angeles.
I'll tell you what's funny. That is a good question. I recently did a piece on Amelia Earhart, and it's funny because, again, one of the first famous female aviators, and I had no idea she had an L.A. connection, but I'm driving in North Hollywood one day, and I see this Amelia Earhart library and a statue, and I was like, that's weird. Turns out she used to live in Toluca Lake, and the reason she came out to live in Toluca Lake is because the Burbank Airport at that time in the 20s and 30s was the primary airport in Los Angeles, and you know that's where she took off. Actually, that is where she took off on the infamous flight. But the fact is, Los Angeles is so important, as in so many industries, in the history of aviation and these early airports and airfields. You know, LAX used to be known as Mines Field, and at the time when LAX was created, it was only the third most important airport in Los Angeles, which is hilarious to me because now it's LA International. But Burbank, there was an airport in Glendale, Van Nuys Airport were all, you know, as if not more important than Los Angeles. But it turned into not just the airports and the airfields because you could fly 12 months a year and because these aviators didn't have to wait for good weather. You know, if it rains in LA, wait a day and it's going to have a beautiful day. I mean, that's one of the things we all love about LA. So it made it this climate, but even in addition to the climate, the industry and just LA's ability to evolve, whether it was World War II, one of my favorite stories is about the Burbank Airport, how they camouflage the airport, and you see these pictures of they put canopies over the huge Burbank Airport to make it look just like an innocuous suburb, houses and dogs, and it was created by like the Walt Disney himself was the one who was like, yo, we know Burbank Airport is a target, let's make it into something it's not. So all these industries kind of coming together to help the aviation industry. And then because of our proximity to the Pacific coast, and at the time, you know, the enemy was coming from that side, Lockheed and all these companies manufactured planes. Van Nuys at Burbank, at LAX, they all had these facilities to manufacture airplanes. And then from that stemmed the aerospace industry. And even to this day, like you say, SpaceX, above and beyond, you know, it's not just, I don't even know if you call that aerospace now. What do you call that? Like, that's the absolute future. But Los Angeles, that is an episode that needs to be told. But Los Angeles was extremely important to aviation, and especially the South Bay. I did an episode on El Segundo where I actually called El Segundo the most important community in Los Angeles. And part of that is because it was the aerospace capital of the world at one point. So.
Hello, Evan. Have you ever considered doing a series on LA-based bands? And you remind me of Hugh Hauser.
Oh,
You're
thank you.
awesome.
First of all, thank you for the Hugh Hauser comment. That was one that, you know, growing up, I did not, this is the truth, I didn't know who Hugh Hauser was until I was in college. And I had a friend that worked with me at the Daily Bruin called Jeff, his name was Jeff Kamiatek. And he always told me that he wanted to follow in Hugh Hauser's footsteps. I said, Hugh Hauser, what, is that I didn't even know it was a person. I was like, what a weird name. That was honestly, that's my first, I was like, Hugh Hauser. And then I started to look at these videos, these kind of homespun, kind of, where the guy, if you guys have not seen Hugh Hauser, even if you have, it's somebody that was genuinely curious, you know, eternally passionate, and just really loved the story. And I don't pattern myself after anybody. In fact, I painstakingly don't. But I connect with the fact that, you know, I'm curious and I want to learn, and like I want to tell people what I learned, and that's so I appreciate you saying that, because that is beyond huge shoes to fill. That is somebody who I truly have to call one of my adult heroes, and like thank you for saying that. But back to the actual question. Series of bands in Los Angeles. Man, this is the truth. I have a video one lone video. It's called Behind the Song, Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge. And there's so many good songs about Los Angeles. And my goal was to have a series where it would be, Randy Newman, I Love L.A., Tupac, To Live and Die in L.A., all these Los Angeles songs I was going to get into. And it still, might happen. But it's such a Pandora's box, especially in Los Angeles, because so many bands have come out. But this is the truth. People have asked me, because I try to make 5-6 new videos a week, which is a pretty big workload, but it's something I love. They're like, oh, slow down, you're going to run out of content. I'm like, dude, there's no chance. It's not a question about running out of content. It's a chance of how long am I going to live, because I'm going to do these videos 5-6 times a week until I'm, God willing, 80, 90 years old, because there's so much stuff to cover, including bands in Los Angeles. So I promise you, I'm aware of that. And not just bands, all the great venues. I mean, Troubadour, Rainbow Room. I mean, there's so many good, the Whiskey A Go-Go. I mean, there's so many good places where all these bands form. So yes, one day I'm absolutely going to get to that. But man, there's so much to cover, but that's absolutely on the agenda. So great question.
Yeah. So I think we're going to wrap it up here.
Okay, thank you so much for attending today's LMA program, and please come back on Sunday, July 23rd, when Bricia Lopez from Guelaguetza Restaurant and Javier Cabral from LA Taco will be here to discuss their newest cookbook, Asada. Their conversation will be moderated by Patty Rodriguez, the co-creator of the Little Libros children's book company, so you don't want to miss that. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, this is Kevin's part?
That's fine.
Hold on, let me say something. That's actually a great one. You guys should go, because all three of those people are super important to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So absolutely check that out.
Oh, thank you. And can we give a hand to Evan one last time to thank him? Yeah. Great program. Thank you so much.
And to Kelly, thank you, Kelly.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, Kelly, too. If you can hear us, Kelly.
Kelly. Maybe she went back to the reference desk. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So thank you again for joining us. And that's the conclusion of this program. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for helping us kick out season 8. Woo!
Also, we will be handing out shirts afterwards, so come see us. They're limited edition, so there's not enough shirts probably for everybody, but we do have little trinkets as well. We have pins, we have business cards, and
We got pins.
I just want to say, honestly, thank you, everybody, for being here. I genuinely appreciate you, but most importantly, I'm glad we all love Los Angeles. This is an amazing city. We do love L.A.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what?
You want to tell?
All right, L.A., it's been a minute.
Yeah. We're going to do a selfie together. Here we go.
Everyone wants a selfie with everybody here. Yeah.
Here's